Hey there, IT 145 students. So in this recording, we are going to go through the details about objects, classes in the Java programming language. So as you know, Java is an object-oriented programming language, and the idea of an object-oriented programming language is to create objects that are then used throughout the application. So this is a very important concept that you have to master, and I like that in our curriculum, we start you right here in Module 2, getting into objects, creating them, so that way you can work with them throughout this class. And then also when you get to your other programming classes like CS210 or in the Android development course, you are familiar with objects and you're able to create them from the get-go. So let's get into it. So in programming, an object is a grouping of data and it provides operations that work with the data. So if you are not encapsulating information about some kind of object, so for instance, we have a chair. You can see in the picture right here that this chair has green fabric, and they're telling us that it's made out of wood. So those are things that this chair has. Also, the chair lets you sit on it. So not only does it have data about it, it also provides you things that you can do with it. So in this case, we've got a chair. You can see there's a couch in here. Looks like it's red. It's also made out of wood. You can sit on this couch, but you could also lie down on this couch. A completely different object in there. There's a drawer. It's made out of wood, has a metal bar, and you're able to put stuff into it. You're also able to take stuff out. So keep in mind the idea of an object is it has some kind of information about it, and we provide ways of working with it. If we are not encapsulating data, then we're really not doing object-oriented programming. The idea is we should be able to create many instances of these objects, right? I should be able to create as many chairs as I want, or a couch or a drawer. Think about a dresser. It's made up of drawers. Think about a living room. It might be made up of a chair and a couch and a dresser that has drawers. So if we don't have the usage of these objects in multiple places, we're really not doing object-oriented programming. We might be creating more like a manager type class where we're providing ways to work with other objects. So they go down and they give you some more details, things like, there's restaurants and hotels. And again, I've touched on the idea of we are doing encapsulation. Okay, so we are providing a high level way of accessing internal details about something. So this idea is called encapsulation. What data do we want to have? And then we're going to provide methods that work with it. Okay, so in the next section, we kind of introduce you to what a class looks like. So in Java, we have the keyword class, and then you have the name of the class. Remember, all code blocks in Java are are delineated with open and closed curlies. So everything inside here is going to be accessible in the restaurant class. And for now, we're kind of ignoring some details. We'll talk about this restaurant class more as we go through, but it's going to have some internal fields. So we know that it's going to have a name, it's going to have a rating, and we might have the ability to print details about that restaurant. Now, this is one thing I want to be careful about. So I'm not a big fan of them putting a print method in here because this is going to require us using system.out.println in this method, and that's kind of a big no-no. For now, it's okay. Okay. But a better way to implement this would be to provide a method that returns what would be printed out. And that way we can reuse this class in any type of implementation, not just a console application. Okay. So again, the idea here is we're going to have a restaurant. And again, I know most of you have had an intro programming class where you might have touched on creating some classes. But we're going to come down here. We're going to create a restaurant. So we have to declare the data type. And again, it has to be a class type. And then we'll have a variable name. And then we use the new keyword. So we have a new restaurant created. So Fave Place, this is a restaurant. And then we have access to all of the things that are public inside the class. So we can call set name, set rating, we can call the print method, and these are going to let us interact with that particular data. So keep in mind in Java, when you're using a class, you are creating a variable that is of a reference type. So in the first chapter, in chapter 1, we introduced you to int and double and float. Those are primitive types. So here we have a reference type. And to create a reference type, you always have to use the new keyword. And you're creating an object. So it's different than a primitive type. A primitive type, like an integer value of just 1, all it does is hold that value. An object, keep in mind, is going to have things like its name, its rating, and so forth. So it's going to encapsulate more details. Uh, just like in Python or even in Java, now that you've had a week or so of some Java programming, you access the members of the class using the dot operator. I can't tell you how powerful it is for new programmers to create a variable. So for instance, we have fave lunch place here, and then you come down here and you hit the dot operator. You're going to see all of the things that a restaurant has that you have access to. And you might have done this in some of the other places. You might have created strings. We did the char at. Again, anything that's available, you'll see when you hit the dot operator in an IDE. Again, the Java string class that you've used, it has public methods that exist. So we've used the char at method in the first module. So on a string variable, we could do the dot operator and we would see char at, and we give it an index of which position we want of the character. So for instance, if I had position 0, then that would access the very first character. We can also use the length method. This is going to return the length of the string, how many characters it contains. And again, these are just some of the methods that are available in the string, in a string variable. All right, so let's get down to it. Let's go ahead and define a class. And so when we actually define a class, first thing we're going to do is figure out what fields, what data does that class, does that object have. So for our restaurant, we're going to say that it has a name and a rating. So let's go ahead and just create this class right here. So again, I've opened up Eclipse. I've got a project already created. We're going to right click new class, and we're going to go ahead and just copy, just like they have there, restaurant, finish. Great. And let's go ahead and just copy these two fields that they have. And we're going to paste them in here. Great. So we have a name and we have a rating. Now, we use the private keyword. So these are a part of a restaurant, but we are going to limit access to how users can either get this information or set it. So for now, we're going to create some methods in here. So we have a set name method. We could type this all out ourselves, or I can let Eclipse help me out. I can go right click, source, generate getters and setters. And so the fields that I've defined, I can provide a set method like you see here. So I'll go ahead and just select both of these, and we'll create we're going to select setters. So if I expand these, I can see that's going to create my setters right here. And we're going to make these public. We want to give access to these to our different people. So I'm going to click generate. And as you can see, it created some methods for us. Clean this up. Again, we want some white space before and after any code blocks. Has a print method. So this one I have to create myself. So keep in mind, just like we learned in the beginning of this chapter, when I create a method, I have to specify what data type it returns, and if it doesn't, then it's void. These are setters. We're going to set these fields here. We don't return anything. So these have to have a void. If I don't, then this is going to have a syntax error. It's really saying, I don't know what you want me to do. So We need to set this to be a void. And again, this print method would print the details about it, and this is going to be a void method as well. So then they have another method called restaurant favorites. We'll go ahead and create that in here as well. New class restaurant favorites. You can see that it has the main method, so we'll go ahead and let it create it for us. And here is the power of object-oriented programming. We're going to come in here. We're going to go restaurants, fave lunch place equals new restaurants. Great. So now I have a variable that is a restaurant type. And if I go fave lunch place and I hit the dot operator, I can see that I get the set name, I get the set rating, I get the print method. These are methods that we've created. I can see that they're coming from the restaurants class. I also get all sorts of other things because it's also an object. I get an equals method, and for now, we'll talk about that later in our course, but I get lots of different methods that we might potentially use later on. You can see here that they try to access that rating. So in a programming language like, oops, I want dot rating, not set it. And it's just being stupid. It's automatically trying to fill that in for me. So in Python, you don't have the idea of setting private and public members. So here in Java, this is a syntax error because it's saying that the variable rating is not visible. Don't come in here and make this public, okay? So restaurant, this is private for a reason. Member variables in a class are always private. So we have a syntax error. If we want to actually set the rating, then we have to call that method. Great. So now we have a favorite lunch place and we have a rating set of 5. So again, we can kind of see they typed out the implementations. We let the IDE implement the implementation for us, but these are going to do the exact same thing. Set name, this takes in a restaurant name and sets the member variable to that. Now, we can see right here that in this implementation, it made the parameter name the exact same as the field name. That's fine. We have to use the this keyword in order to set it. If I don't, then I can see I've kind of got some syntax highlighted here. It's saying that the assignment to variable name has no effect because this references the parameter value, not the field. So the field is right here. It's in restaurant. It's this guy. This right here is the parameter that's coming in. They go ahead and implement this print method. So let's go ahead and implement that. So sure, we'll print out the name and its rating. And then we'll go ahead and just copy all of this right here. For now, I would highly encourage you, type this out yourself because I want you to see that when you go fave, lunch place, and then hit the dot operator and you see the things that the restaurant has. I can set the name to a string. I can set the rating and so forth. And so when we run this, right click, run as Java application. And I think I clicked the wrong button. I think I ran as coverage. So run as Java application. I can see that it's going to print out the details of my favorite restaurants. Favorite lunch place, we set the name to Central Deli. We set its rating to 5. Great. So Central Deli has a rating, favorite lunch place. Central Deli has a name of Central Deli. We didn't set its rating. So by default, if I don't provide something, it gets its default value. So in this case, default of an integer value or a numeric is going to be 0. For a string, it would have been an empty string. If we had a Boolean in here, it's going to default to false. And then we did set the rating for friends, and that got the 5 right there. They do provide some other examples of classes. So in here, they have a runner info class. We have the time that the user has run, we have the distance that they've run, so we can set their time, we can set their distance. And then here's a very helpful method. This is a little bit more object oriented than that print method that we see. We get their speed in miles per hour, and this is a calculation. It takes their distance run, that's a variable that's available throughout the class, and we divide it by their time in per hour. So in an hour, there are 3,600 seconds. So this method is going to return their speed in miles per hour. And this is always going to be the latest values. So this doesn't save this value to a field. We only want to encapsulate data that is not supposed to change. So time run, distance run, we set these values. We would not have a value as a variable called speed MPH. It just doesn't make sense. These are dependent on these two variables. So we just return that calculation. Okay, so the idea of a class, we have mutators and accessors. So right now in our restaurant class, we have ways of setting the name, setting the rating. Those are mutating methods. Anytime we change a value of a field. An accessor method gets the value, but doesn't modify the value. So we typically provide getters for this information. So let's just come into our restaurant class right here. I'm going to give it a little bit of white space. We could type this in ourselves, or I can let the IDE generate for them for me. Right click. We go to source, generate. We want select getters. Again, we already have the setters, so this will create the getter methods for us. We want these as public, and we click generate. Great, now we have a method that returns the name. That is this variable right here. We have a method that returns the rating. That is this variable right here. The format of these methods, it's always going to be get and then name, get and rating. So camel case notation, returning that particular variable. So now if I go back to restaurant favorites, we could come back out here. And if we just wanted the name, so fave lunch place dot, I can hit get. And now I have access to the name. Fave dinner place, hit the dot operator. Again, I can get the rating, I can get the name, and I can do whatever I want with it. We could print them. We could calculate the averages. In fact, here real quick, we'll just do that. Int average equals fave lunch place dot get rating plus fave lunch place. Oops, I did that twice. Fave dinner place dot get rating. So we have to take those and divide by how many there are. So in this case, 2. And oh, we probably shouldn't make that an integer, right? We should make it a double. System.out.println average, and we will print the average. Let's go ahead and set central deli fave lunch place dot set rating. Let's set it to a 2. So we have a 5 and a 2. Our average would be 3.5. So let's go ahead and run that. Check it out. So I got the ratings. I calculated their average of my favorites, and it's a 3.5. Okay. So an example of using those getters. Now, we can also have private methods within our class. So for instance, we could have had in here a method that is private. So for a restaurant, what is something we might want to do? Generate. I'm just going to call it output. And I'm going to do this right here. I'm just going to return the name and this concatenated output. And so now for this print method, if we wanted to, instead of doing that, I could generate output. I think I got a typo in there. There we go. So now I could call my private method and perform action with it. So if I need something that should not be exposed outside of the class, then we provide a private method for it. So if I go back out here, so if I try to do fave lunch place and hit dot, type generate output, I can see that I can't get to it because it is not visible. It's private, not public. Okay, so next thing we're going to talk about is initializing those fields and then using constructors to set the data for us. So they go back to the restaurant class. Keep in mind, like I said before, if we do not use these setters right here, the name and rating, these are going to be their default values. So if I come back here and let's create another restaurant, another one equals new restaurant, system.out.println, or I can just call another .print, right? So when I print this another, I'm going to get empty string and I should see a 0. So run it. And oh, actually I got null and 0. It's null because it's an object. So anything that is an object is going to be null. Anything that is a primitive like int is going to be its default value. In this case, it's a 0. So we could do this. We could come in here and we could default like this, no name, and we say rating is -1. That kind of makes sense because you would not use a negative number for the rating. Now, they're showing this as an example because when I rerun this, now I'm going to have no name and -1, so it gets these values, but really we don't want to do that either, okay? So typically we're not going to assign values for the fields like this. So while they're showing that you can do this, we don't typically do that. What we want to use is called the constructor. This is a special class member method that is called anytime you use the new keyword. So when we use the new keyword, this constructor method is called, and it's going to set, it's designed to set the fields of our class. So right here, they've got the implementation of the constructor. So let's go ahead and copy this right here. And so this is a constructor with no arguments. Okay, this is called a no arg constructor. It's going to set the name to, again, that no name. It's going to set the rating to -1. In effect, I'm going to get the same results we had before. However, it's not going to set these in the fields. It's going to set it in the constructor. And oh, by the way, I just want to show you an example here. Let me come back here. Let's put a breakpoint here. When we run this, when the new keyword gets called, the name will be right in here. It's going to come in here and set these values. So let's debug. And so we are on line 7 in restaurant class. We're right here. And that's from this first call right here. So favorite lunch place, new restaurant. Watch this. It's going to, so step over. Where are my step keys? It's right there. Oops, I think I clicked, that's okay. So step over, favorite lunch place, take a look here. It's got a name, it's no name. Has a rating, -1. Step over, I'm in the constructor. This is for the other restaurant variable. It's for favorite dinner place. So favorite dinner place starts out, has a name, no name, has a rating of -1. And now check this out. Favorite lunch place, it just set the name to Central Deli. Look, it's got a rating of -1, but now we're going to set it to 2. So favorite lunch place was -1, now it is 2. So again, the idea of this constructor is when I use the new keyword, this method right here is called, and we typically set our fields with values. For now, we're just setting them to default values. Eventually, we'll pass in the data that we want inserted into the name and rating. So that's in section 2.14. So again, we provided a default no argument constructor, but we can have a constructor that takes in parameter values. Remember, this is a method just like any kind of method. I can give it parameter values. So now I will provide it an initial name and an initial rating when I create it. So really, we want to get rid of this constructor here. Okay, so we don't want to have a default constructor that just defaults it to no name and rating. We really want to know the name and rating of this restaurant when you create it. So that's what this code right does here. It takes and assigns name to what comes in as a parameter value and sets the rating. So let's save this. And again, I've got this commented out. And I should have syntax errors because now it's saying you don't have a constructor that doesn't take any parameter values. You have to provide it a name and a rating. So that means when I create this restaurant, I need to give it its name, Central Deli, and I need to give it its rating. That's a 2. Friends Cafe, and a rating of 5. Now that we have constructors, we don't want to use these setters. So let's go over here back to the restaurant class, and we want to avoid using setters at all costs. One of our code guidelines for object-oriented programming is we don't use setters. We only use the constructor to set the fields. So if I see this, the only time I should ever see a setter is on required zyBooks assignments. So if I come back here, the setters, those are no longer accessible. So comment that out. We can't have that anymore. And we don't care about another restaurant anymore. Let's just delete that. And cross your fingers, we should see the same output we were getting before. I still have the exact same values, so my average should still be 3.5. So let's run this. Great, I get the same output as before. Fantastic. So let's go back to our code. Again, we have these setters. Let's just delete these out. We have this constructor. We're going to delete this out as well. So a question that you're going to have as a new programmer is, what kind of constructor should I provide? For now, whatever fields your object has, you should have a constructor that provides those values, okay? And next thing, so let's go to section 16. So we saw earlier that when we did the set method, and the IDE created the method for us, that it used the this keyword because the IDE is going to create a parameter that is the same name as the member variable. Well, we can also generate this constructor. So let me do this. I'm going to delete this. And we can let the IDE create the constructor for us. So right click, go to source, generate constructor using fields. We want both the name and rating. We want it to be public, and we click generate. And right there, you can see that it created the constructor for us. It uses the same names as the parameter values, as the fields, and so it has to use the this keyword. Oh, by the way, it makes a call to super. We're going to go ahead and just delete that out for now because we are not using any kind of inheritance. So for now, you can delete that out. But again, you can see it's pretty easy. I can define my member variables, and then I could let the IDE create the constructor, the getter method for me. We could also get things like a toString method, right click, source, generate toString. We're going to use all the fields, generate. And so this would give me a nice string representation of my data. Oh, by the way, you can also use the this keyword to reference the object and then call things like constructors or other methods. You can see here that they've created a default constructor and then they call the constructor using the this keyword. So check this out. I could come in here, public restaurant I don't have any values, and I call this, and then I pass it empty string and -1. So this is referring to the constructor, the one that takes a name and a rating. Oh, by the way, I do want to point out, remember, this is a method. If I switch the order of these, okay, so if I switch the order, it's going to complain because I'm not passing them, I'm not matching the proper format. Taking it as an int and string, that's not defined. It is string then int. So that has to be in the proper order. Oh, by the way, just like we've learned with methods, we can provide Java documentation for all of these. So we want to let the IDE do this for us. And again, the powerful thing in this is when I use these, I can see that it's telling me the order in which I need to provide the values, and it's telling me what things are. So it's the name, it's the rating. I can avoid being confused by the details. And again, all of these we would provide JavaDoc for. Get the name of the restaurant. The name of the restaurant. So very simple. Always, always, always provide JavaDoc. If there are parameters, use the @param notation. If there's a return value, use the @return method notation. If I don't have any kind of return value, okay, you can see here with this print, this prints the status of the object of the restaurant. We'll say that. How about this? Instead of status, details of the restaurant. So we always, always, always want to use JavaDoc to document our methods. Okay, that's going to wrap it up for this recording. So lots to get through here. Make sure you take your time and use the IntelliSense, seeing the things that you create, so that way you understand creating objects. All right, I'll talk to you next time.